I propose that there are only 4 types of tech blog posts. So you can pick from this menu. All right, the first type is detective mystery. So this is your classic debugging story. It could also be like, why did they design it that way? The second type is how I built this. So it could be I built something from scratch. It could be I migrated a system from point A to point B. Third, there is explain a technical concept. So this is just a very straightforward, hey, this is how B trees work. Or it could be, here's a common problem and the solution. And finally, there's my opinion. That could be, here's my prediction about the future. It could be, here is a comparison of framework A and framework B. It could also be something like, here's a best practice. So now that you know these 4 types of tech blog posts, you're ready to apply it. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess, and today I'm going to talk about how you, a software engineer or someone who works with software, can write a great technical blog post. Now, there are a lot of books out there on writing. I would know because this is my bookshelf at home. So why come to a talk about writing? Well, one thing I have never seen is a case study of what it looks like to produce a great blog post from first draft to final draft. So we're in for a special treat today because earlier this year, an engineer named Eric Fritz at Render, where I work, wrote a series of great technical blog posts about Postgres. And this is just the very first one, which we will focus on today. But let me just show you some of the outcomes from this. First of all, this piece was organically picked up by Postgres Weekly and put at the very top of their newsletter, which goes out to over 16,000 readers. We also had an engineering candidate write in to say, every time Eric Fritz writes something about Postgres, I have to read it. So this is after only 3 posts. So something is clearly going really right here. Now, I worked with Eric as the editor on these pieces, and he asked me back in June, hey, can you explain the thought process behind your edits? He specifically asked for insights into the meta thoughts, which I interpreted as, give me the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish. So that will be the talk today. I will talk about the thought process behind writing, and I'll break this down into the 3 phases that we typically take when we're writing a piece. First is getting started. So that's like finding your topic. Then immediately after you find the topic, you have to figure out how you're going to talk about it. So that's finding the angle. And then finally, we'll dig into actual words and revision. Now, you might expect me to just dive into the words, but let's be honest, most of us, including myself, we get stuck on step 1, getting started. So let's start there. At the end, I will say a few words about what it means to be great when it comes to technical writing. Now, first, a bit about me. I am currently a developer advocate at Render. It's actually the first time for me being a developer advocate. Before this, I spent 8 years as a software engineer, first at Facebook, at companies like Pinterest and Stripe, as well as some very tiny startups. I also have been writing my entire life. And in recent years, I've had the pleasure of helping write and edit blog posts at Retool, Render, and beyond. Now, if you've never heard of Render, this is the bare minimum that's going to make this talk make a little more sense to you. So Render is, I'd say, a fast way to get from code in a Git repo to a live web app. It's going to take you minutes instead of maybe hours wrangling AWS. We support a lot of the languages that you're familiar with, and for this talk, one of the most relevant parts is that we support managed Postgres. So in addition to letting you spin up your web service, we also let you spin up a database right next to it. So let's dive in. All right, phase 1 is getting started. Now, when I start working with somebody as an editor, I really like to get to know them. Like, what are your goals? Like, what's a win for you? And when we're at a company, what is the company trying to do? So let's take a look at Eric's post as an example. So because we support managed Postgres at Render, we sometimes have customers accidentally writing slow queries and causing incidents for themselves. And we like to educate them so that they can avoid doing this. Now, Eric is on the team, the data storage team at Render, and he had been working with a lot of our customers on these types of issues, and he personally wanted to share what he's working on. He also really likes to write. He said, I want to write a post every couple months. And that's not necessarily something I hear every day, so I got really excited. And if you see his personal site, which I'd encourage you to go look up, he actually writes a lot beyond what is required for work. So he clearly gets some enjoyment out of this. Now, out of all of this context, it was really obvious we're going to talk about Postgres performance. Now, for you, I could say, hey, there's all these reasons for you to write. I could throw up this 2x2 of short-term goals, long-term, intrinsic and extrinsic wins. But really, I'll just leave you with this one galaxy brain reason to write, which is, if you really think about it, probably the words you write about any given project will outlast the code you write for that project. So just think about that. Now for ideas, really just use your work. This will honestly often just flow out of your goals. Everything else is hard mode because you will be doing additional research. Now, as a software engineer, this is actually your superpower, the fact that you are in the details of challenging problems and building things every day. That's something you might take for granted, but is really honestly going to be the richest source of material. So just use your work. Okay, so next, we have a topic. Now we have to figure out how are we going to talk about this topic. So the universe of options is really large, but I will boil this down for you. I propose that there are only 4 types of tech blog posts, so you can pick from this menu. Now I know this is going to eventually be on YouTube, so if I've missed a type, you can comment below and let me know what I've missed. All right, the first type is detective mystery. So this is your classic debugging story. It could also be like, why did they design it that way? The second type is how I built this. So it could be I built something from scratch. It could be I migrated a system from point A to point B. Third, there is explain a technical concept. So this is just a very straightforward, hey, this is how B trees work. Or it could be, here's a common problem and the solution. And finally, there's my opinion. That could be, here's my prediction about the future. It could be, here is a comparison of framework A and framework B. It could also be something like, here's a best practice. So now that you know these 4 types of tech blog posts, you're ready to apply it. I should say, there is an easy mode for this, like I mentioned earlier. The easy mode is on the left side. If you basically have a detective mystery or a how I built this, just use that because you will be, one, with the mystery, you have a story, which is automatically going to be really interesting. And with both of these, you often have the rich detail that makes your piece really come alive. With the other 2 types, it is definitely possible. You may just have to work a little bit harder. Okay, like I mentioned, you now have this framework and now you're ready to apply it. And we're gonna do this like a quiz. So let's go to Eric's post. Out of these possible angles, which one do you think we picked for Eric's post? Angle A, database internals. Here are 3 components of Postgres and how they affect Postgres performance. Angle B. Here is a list of commands that you can use to debug Postgres performance. Or C. Do you know why a simple looking query caused a massive slowdown in our internal database and caused an internal incident? No? Well, let me explain how this went down. All right, it was C. And in fact, this was the first major edit that I worked with Eric on. We elevated his initial draft, which was about 7,000 words written in this explain a technical concept, and we realized through chatting, hey, there's actually a really cool story, a detective mystery, a debugging story that we could tell. And that, A, would probably be more interesting to our audience. And second, it's going to be easier for us to even write and make great. So that was our first big edit. All right, hopefully with this framework, that helps you get words on a page. And now we can talk about writing and refining words. Now, I know the main thing I do want to point out is if you spend the time on phase 1 and 2, you will set yourself up for much easier times in this third phase. All right, let's talk about openings first. Now, you don't have to read all the words here, but this is Eric's very first draft of the detective story version of the essay. And you can see, I think it's a really good thing that we have this urge to share a lot of background details. And that's what he does. A lot of background first about render CI/CD. Then we say, our staging pipeline got blocked. There's some more background about CI/CD. And then finally, we opened an incident and started investigating. Now, if we graph this, it's kind of like a lot of background, bit of action, more background, then more action. Let's look at the after. So the after, there's just a bit of background, but it's about Postgres and in relation to render. Then we had the same thing. Our staging pipeline got blocked, but now it's like by this simple looking query, and then we say, here's how we debugged it. Here's the story. Now, if we graph this, it's like background, action, a big nerd's knife, and then a summary. So here are the questions we're implicitly answering for the reader. First, what universe are we in? We're in the universe of Postgres. Okay, then what is this specifically about? Oh, it's about this query. And then we implicitly answer, is this for me? Like, if you're not curious about this query, this post is not for you. This format is actually something that you can just use if you're looking for a way to start your blog post. I've actually used this a lot, and if you look at the other posts in the series, I copy myself. So this is literally the third post in the series, and it follows the same exact format, of course, with different content. So feel free to use this. That's the easy button. When it comes to content, here's some things to think about for the opening. First, who benefits the most, and how do we let them know? So it could be like people who use Postgres. What are the most interesting facts in this piece? It doesn't always have to be just the main takeaways. Then what stands out about this post? Maybe is there something that we're doing in this post that other similar resources don't do? And finally, in a story, always think, can we start closer to the action? Now let's talk about headings. This is pretty much the second thing that a reader will do. They will start scrolling down your piece, and the headings will tell them what to expect from your piece. Now, not only is that good for the reader, headings even help you start to outline your piece. So, like, what am I even going to write about? You can start with the heading. Now, on this left side, this is Eric's initial headings, which I think are good. Like, we could have shipped this. The one exception would probably be like provenance. Like, That's kind of a fancy word I might swap out. Here is the after, and you can see my style is a bit, I tend to like to pull out more detail and make the headings a little more lively. Now, what are we actually doing here? Oops. First, you can see that we can see a bit of the story already, saying a blocked staging pipeline. Okay, now we know where we're starting with. We can see we're going to see some clues. You can see we're going to learn about PG stat activity and PG blocking PIDs. And there's even this sort of PG stat activity finds a suspect. It's like, whoa, there's some action built in. So I tend to like this more because I think you get a lot more out of that initial scroll and you start to understand what the piece is about. All right, let's now talk about the body. Now there's no way to cover the thousands of words actually in this piece. So I will highlight one part of the piece that we edited to show you some of the principles you can use. So just first, visually, you could tell that the before side looks a lot more visually dense than the after side. And this is actually a good thing that you can do just to diagnose, okay, where might I want to go and like do some edits. So making things skimmable, I think, is a good goal when it comes to blog posts. We already talked about descriptive headings, and other things that you can keep in mind are shorter sections and paragraphs. One way of achieving that is even paragraphs can be turned into bullet lists, and then inserting images, graphs, and code snippets wherever you can and where it's going to help the story. Now, we actually have good examples here of the images, the code snippets. So we kept those. But we did do this bullet point thing quite a bit here. So let me show you some examples. This is the first place where I did it. Now, you can see this wall of text kind of on the left side. But really, what it's just saying is, hey, this is the part in the story, by the way, we first meet this suspect query. And we're like, hey, this query looks kind of innocent, innocuous, because of these three reasons. That's just really skimmable now on the right side. Now, immediately after this, we do it again. So now we're saying, hey, a sensible theory could be that this query is just a red herring. But we ruled out this hypothesis with these two observations, number 1 and number 2. Much more skimmable. All right, another thing with the body is that in addition to being skimmable, we want to keep things moving. So here, 2 really great tools in your toolbox are just cutting, and you can move things around to asides or info boxes. So let's see some examples. Here's an example of a cut in this section. You can see I just removed an entire sentence that really didn't add much to the story and didn't really add much information either. Like a smart reader could just figure this out. Right under that, you can see we could just shorten individual sentences. So all signs pointed to the following query as our culprit. This seemed to be our culprit. Here's another example from this section. Now, this is much more of a judgment call. This entire section here is at the end of the segment where initially we're like, hey, there's all these things we still don't know about this query, like all these open questions. And I thought, hey, we could just move things along here. All we have to say is now we had a prime suspect, but we needed to prove guilt. All right, let's move on. Here's an example of moving information into an info box. So Eric included a lot of details in here. There was one part where it's, hey, why are open transactions a problem? It just didn't really fit in the middle of the story, but it's still something we wanted to include. And so we just moved that to an aside. All right, that was a lot about the body. Now let's talk about titles. Titles are hard. They make me sweat too. And why are titles so hard? Well, let's take a look. You can see the before of the first 2 titles in this Postgres series, and then the after. So what are we trying to cram into the title here? When I think about titles, the first thing I think about is sparking curiosity. So blocked deployment pipeline, it does spark some curiosity. It's like, what is blocking the pipeline, right? But we can say there's a simple query with a big problem. Okay, now like there's a bit more curiosity. Why is a simple query having a big problem? I also think about making a promise to the reader. So deep diving on the slow query does make a promise. Like we're going to deep dive here. But we can amp up that by saying, hey, we're gonna make a slow query into a fast query using something called stats. Okay, that's a bigger promise. I also think about rhythm. So earlier they mentioned I play music. Hey, you don't need to be a musician. You can just read it out loud. Simple query, big problem. And finally, something I also think about is the content that you can get into your title. Oftentimes, the title will be the only thing people ever read about your post. And especially with things that are maybe more like case studies, maybe different types of writing, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. The more you can get content into your title, it also helps. Okay, now we're at the end. Now, endings can also make people anxious, but I actually think with endings, it's a lot easier. It's fine to keep things short, just 1 to 2 paragraphs, reiterate main points, and where you can, give people something to do or look at next. So in this case, in our first post, we were very lucky because we had a part 2 of the story, so we linked to that. And also, remember that quiz earlier where we did the 3 angles? Remember the second one that was like, here's a list of queries you can use to debug Postgres? Postgres performance. We actually took all of the queries from these posts that were reusable and put them into one docs page. And that docs page links back out to the case studies link back to that docs page. So that works out really well. And so that's what we do here as well. All right, so now you've seen a case study of writing a post from beginning to end. And now I do want to say a couple words about this word great I've been throwing around. What makes it great? Now, when it comes to writing, I am a bit of a softie. I think everyone can be a winner. Anyone can write a great tech blog post. And I think that because there are different flavors of great. So first, there is everyday great. This is your favorite comfortable t-shirt that you want to wear every day. That is everyday great. So for writing, that means you're happy, you wrote the version you wanted to read, that you wanted to write. And I think it's useful. Perhaps you've shared information only you have because, let's say you worked on the project. Or maybe it's not super groundbreaking, but you've summarized a lot of information and just saved the reader a lot of time. All right, but we do want to put on our critic's hat because we all want to be great, right? So far, we haven't talked so much about the impact of writing on the reader. And I actually think greatness in a piece of writing does not come from the number of views that you get, but it comes from what you make the reader feel. And for each of these types of blog posts, I think there is a way to think about greatness in terms of how do you make the reader feel. So for detective mystery, I think that great feeling is I'm entertained and I feel smarter. So like you told me a great story and I learned something. For how I built this, I think it's I'm inspired to transform. Like you did something so awesome, now I'm gonna do something too. Maybe I wouldn't build the same thing, but I feel that energy from you. For a technical concept, I think the best outcome is now I get it. Like I was so confused before, and now you've fixed this for me. And finally, for my opinion, I don't think you need to make people agree with you, but it is great if they think, I never thought about it that way. Now, for anything great, I do think there are common ingredients, and these are the things that you can watch out for and aim for. First is a strong nerd snipe. That's something we definitely saw with Eric's post. It often comes, with something hard or weird. Second, I think there's something just memorable about the piece because it's unique and different. That often is the author's voice. It's like the details they choose to include. Something's just different about it. And finally, I do think they all tend to be easy to read, and that is a lot of the edits that we talked about. So my spicy take for this audience of software engineers is that you can spend a lot of your energy focusing on trying to find these situations, these strong nerd snipes to write about. You kind of can get help with the other parts, but really it's going to be up to you to stop in the middle of your day and go like, wait, this is like really interesting and I should write about it. So focus on your taste in that direction. Now, I hope you're really excited to write. If there's one slide, the takeaway, you can take a photo of this one and share it on social media. And I will take my own advice here at the end and keep things short. So if you're inspired by this talk, or just in general, feel free to share a topic and an angle and tag SignalConf in me. You can find my socials on my site, jssln.com. It's Jesslyn, but without the vowels, basically. And I am going to put more examples of these edits that I couldn't fit into this talk today. And finally, I'm always really happy to talk about writing. So reach out wherever you can find me. I do also want to put in a plug for Render. If you have something that might relate to Render in any way and you'd want to collaborate on a blog post, definitely get in touch. Very, very happy to chat. So yeah, I am now really excited to see all of you writing more tech blog posts.
Great talk. Couple of questions for you. First off, when is a paragraph better than bullet points?
Ooh. So with bullet points, I do think you have to have some kind of list, right? So some paragraphs just aren't lists. Actually, most of them aren't. So yeah, when that's not appropriate. Yep.
Okay. What is your favorite technical blog post of all time that you can think of?
Oh man. I have to say I will defer this to like later, and I'll answer in Discord because that's like the scariest question to answer on stage.
Okay, next question. What is your favorite book about writing?
Ooh. Okay, so again, favorite of all time is very hard to pick. One book I think is underrated, which was in that photo, is called A Writer's Coach. And that is actually written for feature writing, so like long-form journalistic writing. And if you just look at the table of contents, the table of contents has chapters like color and like rhythm. So that gives you a bit of a flavor. And they apply it to like journalistic writing, which isn't the thing that you would absolutely think of first for that kind of juxtaposition. So I think that's a super underrated book.
Nice. What company's technical blog do you respect the most outside of Render?
Outside of Render, okay. There are some great ones. I mean, I think there's different kinds of great. Again, like that's why I'm like, Stripe is, I did work there too. I think they're very polished and like things they produce are at a very, very high quality. I think, at that quality bar, you do see less content, like less output in general. So there's a bit of a balance. I think Dan Liu has a great piece about technical writing, if you guys know it. And he's like, it's actually better when there are fewer barriers to engineers publishing. And I tend to agree with that. I personally love that that vibe better.
Mm-hmm. All right, last question. How do you handle going editor mode on a coworker without offending them?
Ooh, okay. So one, I actually kind of have a rule that I don't edit people's pieces. Like if you send me a draft, I won't edit it before I first talk to you, like meet you. So that's one thing is I think, it can be very personal. Like I put these words down, it's like part of me. So that's something I really do to avoid that situation.
Yeah, I like that. Well, cool. There are a lot more questions in there that we can't get to in this time. So definitely check that out and respond with the questions that you weren't able to answer. But let's give it up for Jess. Thank you so much.
Thanks.